So Donald Trump has gotten his hands all over pop culture once again. Obviously, when you elect the pop culture president, you're going to get a commander-in-chief who gives a crap about entertainment. And for the first time in a very long time, that commander-in-chief is not somebody with a liberal bend, like, say, a Barack Obama, who's very deeply invested in the likes of Netflix and things like that, and was always seen that way. In fact, some of my earliest memories of thinking about politics were like all of the time Barack Obama spent on late night talk shows. I was like, doesn't this guy have something better to do? Doesn't he have work to do? And I certainly have my critiques of Trump when it comes to this stuff. I think he's tweeting a lot when he could be working, but that's just me. But there have been a lot of stuff going around because he's working with Paramount, because he's very good friends with Larry Ellison, who is, of course, as I've said 1,000 times, he is the father of David Ellison, who is now the CEO. He's in charge over there at Paramount Skydance. Larry Ellison, of course, is the second richest dude in the world. And what Trump basically said was like, look, I want Rush Hour 4, and he got Rush Hour 4. But it's not just that. They're talking about the idea of bringing back the concept of traditional masculinity when it comes to movies. And they reference Bloodsport, that being one of Trump's favorite, and he loves Rush Hour. I love Rush Hour as well. But the thing about it is that the 90s was, for me, was the peak for action entertainment, because that's when I was growing up and first getting into those types of movies and falling in love with it. But I actually think if you want to get back to traditional values in Hollywood, I think the best area to focus on would be to focus on sports movies. But that's just me. Let's talk about it. It was in this article from Semaphore. If you go down the article, first they talk about Trump's relationship with Paramount. They talk about him getting involved with Amazon because Brett Ratner is, of course, making a documentary on Melania Trump. She has since launched her own production company to produce that film and to distribute it, which, of course, you know, I'm always highly skeptical when these politicians or even the family members of politicians get involved in, you know, producing their own media. It's automatically going to be looked at as propaganda. But of course, Brett Ratner is the one who's going to be brought on to direct, most likely, that upcoming Rush Hour movie, given that franchise was his baby. And they get into it about the accusations against Brett Ratner, the Me Too claims, all of that stuff. But they get into more. It says, but now Larry Ellison, one of Trump's most prominent financial supporters, owns a second-tier studio, Paramount. It's actually his son that runs the studio. Paramount is on the cusp of taking control of the great Warner legacy with the giant library and sprawling production to come with it. Look, I don't know if Paramount is going to win out on that bidding war. I know Netflix is interested. I know Saudi Arabia is interested. I know Universal is interested. But going on, film producer Dallas Sonye, friend of the channel, by the way, you should go and check out the video the interview I did with him just recently talking about the Daily Wire's upcoming Pendragon Cycle series. You should go watch it. Dallas says, he predicts a wave of classically male-driven movies with mentally tough, traditional, courageous, confident heroes, maybe even a tad cocky, but dedicated to honor and duty, plus, of course, a few explosions, gun battles, helicopters, fist fights, and car chases. Well, we all do love that stuff. It makes me think back to the action movies I loved when I was a kid, but I guess the first example that I could think of is the 1990 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie. That's a little bit different because it's a comic book film, but I think about GoldenEye. GoldenEye is one of my favorite movies. It was my introduction at a young age to the James Bond franchise and the idea of James Bond serving for Queen and Country. He had a goal. He had to protect his nation. He had to protect the people of Britain. And he did his job and oftentimes sacrificed a great amount to do so. He got the chick in the end, right? Most of the time he got the woman in the end, so I guess it didn't matter. But I think of the Jack Ryan movies like Clear and Present Danger or Patriot Games. I loved those as well. The Die Hard franchise. And you look to what the movies of the 90s were, and you get those types of films. Now, you did get the reason I bring this up is because he's talking about traditional values and stuff like that. Now, you did get the movies like Heat, which, of course, acted more as like a character study. And, of course, Heat is my favorite movie of all time. it talks more about how maybe Macaulay and Hannah, they're not all that different, right? Two sides of the same coin, which of course you could take a drink every time somebody says something like that in a movie. But a lot of those movies, like a GoldenEye or any of the Jack Ryan movies, though there are shades of gray, it is somebody duty bound and doing something because he believes he's doing the right thing. And I love that. Air Force One, love Enemy of the State, love Demolition Man, love Independence Day. The 90s was an amazing time, though I think Independence Day, in my personal opinion, would qualify more as a disaster movie than an action movie. I do think of those as different things, but you see Rush Hour, you see Lethal Weapon, all of these franchises, it was a golden age for those types of movies. And then you see like what we got in 2022, which was like, you got Maverick, you got The Northman, I actually liked The Contractor. But the Triple R is a very, very popular one. But in general, the 355, Blacklight, I'm the only person who liked Uncharted. I thought the Suicide Squad movie was pretty good. Nobody liked Without Remorse at all. And the rest of these movies, Wrath of Man was pretty good, but I think the number one takeaway from that is most of it feels disposable these days. Like, I like Wrath of Man because Guy Ritchie has, he's got a pedigree and he's got a style, and I like that style. But in general, most of these movies, like I said, I liked The Contractor. That was the one with Chris Pine, if I remember correctly. But it was forgettable. It was utterly forgettable, and a lot of these movies are. Top Gun Maverick is one of my favorites in the last decade, but that's the exception and not the rule. And then we go into this past year of 2024. Bad Boys Ride or Die did okay. It's never going to live up to the originals. I really liked Fall Guy, but it didn't have a traditional male hero by any stretch of the imagination. If anything, he's closer to, say, a Transformers character, what's his name from Transformers, where he's a panicky male lead, right? Sam Witwicky is not exactly the traditional idea of the masculine hero, because how can the traditional hero work in a world where there's gigantic robots out planning world destruction and domination? It just doesn't work that way. Dune 2 felt more like spectacle, rather than action. A lot of people, The Killer's Game, nobody cared. Beekeeper, good. I loved Twisters. Beekeeper was very, very popular. Jason Statham is that last holdover of what it feels like to have an old school action star in a lot of ways. And I don't know what to do. I would rather see them focus, if I had my way, on sports movies. I go back and I think about it, and a lot of those concepts of sports movies are things that appeal to both men and women, but I think also appeal heavily to men. When I think about sports movies, I think about the idea of a character overcoming the odds, or a character or characters learning to work together, or the grizzled veteran coming back for another chance at glory. Those are all things that I think appeal to both men and women, but especially to men. And the traditional story in an action movie or an adventure film of the hero's journey will always appeal heavily to men. And I always think back of the example people give of, like, it's the idea of terrorists on a plane. The man dreams or daydreams about saving the day and stopping the terrorists, and the women dream of protecting the children from the terrorists. It speaks to our fundamental differences, the fundamental differences of men and women, which is why I believe so much of the action genre falls flat these days. Whether it's a movie like The 355 or a movie like G20, any of these films, when you put the female lead into the traditionally male role, it works if you're willing to suspend disbelief. I'm one of those people. I really liked Ballerina this year. A little bit forgettable, but the action sequences were extensive and intense, and I really, really enjoyed that. I'm willing to suspend my disbelief because I thought they put together the movie really, really well. But a lot of people, they just don't want to see it anymore. They feel like it's an agenda that's being put forth to kind of train men to think that this, or train men and women to think that this is what the world is like, and that that's what it's going to be. It's not that it's true or real. Movies are inherently not going to be real. The idea here is that it kind of ignores the fundamental truth of how men and women view the world. Men want to save the day. Women want to save and protect the children, and that's just the way it is. I would rather see them do something like sports movies, again, overcoming the odds, or even the concept of cheating. I was getting to thinking of it. I was getting to think of how many of the sports movies that I loved as a kid had a subtle message about cheating. So I think of Mighty Ducks. Okay, Gordon Bombay comes in to teach District 5, and at some point he gets so exasperated that he's like, you know what? Take a dive. And he tries to get the kids to fake getting hurt or injuries, to try and get ahead. And then you get Jesse's dad coming in and says, this is what I gave up my overtime pay for so that I could see my kids taking falls. Like, it had an anti-cheating message. These days, I don't even feel like they would necessarily include that. And that's not to say that there aren't great sports movies. In fact, those have been my bright spot over the last couple of years. I really liked The Hill in 2023. I really liked Gran Turismo in 2023. And I loved F1. I think it was my favorite movie of the year in 2025 by far. But there were other sports movies that did this in the 90s as well. Think of Angels in the Outfield. Angel comes in, Al comes in, and he helps the kids, helps the California Angels cheat all the way up until they get to like the pennant, right? Then suddenly Al's got scruples and he's like, look, I don't know. Like, we can help, but we can't help that much. Or even in Rookie of the Year, Roland Gardner, I guess it's not really cheating because he had the arm injury. Right? He had the arm injury. Suddenly he can throw 110-mile-an-hour fastballs. It was all very impressive. He struck out Barry Bonds even, although I think that was before Bonds got into steroids. Somebody can double check with me on that. Double check for me on that. But even by the end, he goes up on the mound. You guys remember this? He goes on the mound, and somebody left the ball on the mound, and he slips and he falls back, and he lands back on his arm, and he has to pitch that final inning without his ability to throw the 110-mile-an-hour fastball. And spoiler alert, it works because he uses his mom's underhand pitch, and he strikes out the dude from the Mets at the end. It's awesome. And even that has a story of redemption with Chet Steadman, played beautifully by Gary Busey. Chet Steadman, who was a veteran, who was washed up, who had like one of the best games of his life all the way leading up to that final inning, and his arm goes out and he has to get the guy at home beforehand. Those movies spoke to us as kids. They had values, they had messages. I would love to see a resurgence in the sports genre as well as the action genre, because I don't know if they can get away with from the shades of gray that Hollywood is obsessed with nowadays. The villain isn't evil, he's just misunderstood. Hollywood loves that. And I don't know if they have the self-control to get away with trying to excuse evil, which seems to be the case du jour most of the time in Hollywood these days. What do you think about this, guys? Would you rather see more great action movies or more great sports movies? I think for the sake of the youths and the kids, I want to see more great sports movies. And for the sake of the adults, let's give them some great action movies, because let's face it, they can love the sports movies as well. That's my take on the matter. What do you think about Trump's kind of incursion into pop culture? Whether it's his relationship to Larry Ellison, his relationship to Paramount, the way he gets involved with like Seth Meyers and all of these late night show hosts. I find a lot of it hilarious, but very, very frustrating, because I think he sets himself back in a lot of ways because he can't get out of his own way and just focus on what he's doing. Just my thoughts on it. Let me know down below what you think about it, guys. Remember, PCC will be back on December 8th. Mary will be filming. She will be remote. We're picking the podcast back up. We are very excited for that. Until then, thank you for checking out the segment. If you want to follow me, I am on Instagram and X at Brett Dasovic on both of those platforms. Feel free to follow me and let me know what your favorite sports movie is of all time. I would love to hear it. Thanks for watching. Listen to full episodes of Pop Culture Crisis on Spotify.
Keep up with us on social media and make sure you subscribe and ring that bell so you never miss the show. Bye, guys.